The Rings of Power, Episode 6. For a change, this episode springs into action right from the start. Adar storms the town defended by Arondir and Bronwyn, in what truly was a good battle scene. The strategy deployed by the villagers was believable, that of leading the orcs into traps that rendered them surrounded by fire, making it easier to rain arrows over them. The battle also didn't lack ruthless scenes. They weren't afraid to show women and old men being slaughtered. I think all of this was pointed towards showing that the stakes were high, and it was done correctly. They were also able to handle the tension properly with Bronwyn's near-death scene. They managed to show the right amount of suspense, not extending it too much, for there was still a battle raging around the tavern in which Bronwyn was lying, so wrapping that up quickly was another point neatly done. To top it all up, the charge of the Númenóreans and their part in the battle were examples of good cinematography, at least on the visual part. But only regarding the choreography and the aesthetics in general, because the plot raises many questions. For instance, how did the Númenóreans know where would Adar strike? I know, Halbrand was with them, but he was away from the Southlands for a long time, and there was no connection whatsoever between Galadriel's plot and that of Arondir and Bronwyn so far, so how could they tell the exact time and spot of the attack? Secondly, did the Númenóreans just launch an expedition into Middle-earth just to save a backwater village with 100 people or so at best? It took a big political toll for Miriel to convince her people to send the ships, so all of this just makes no sense. The aftermath of the battle does not get better. Miriel introduces Halbrand to Bronwyn, and she immediately takes him for the king that was promised, even though she does not know him. Why? Nobody mentioned anything about that at any point, so given that nobody in the Southland seems to know him, he could just have been a random Númenórean soldier. How does Halbrand support his claim? Or are we to suppose that the Southerners will just accept anyone randomly as king? But there's no time to ponder about any of that, because Waldreg finally inserted the sword into the moldering machine. Since we see the whole point of the mechanism activated by the sword was to break the nearby dam, then why bother besieging a whole town to get Theo's sword in the first place? Why not just break the dam by any other means, thus making the water flood the lava underneath just the same, and not bothering waging a needless war? Unless we were being massively misdirected on purpose, the plot for this whole episode doesn't seem well thought. At least we got to see how a few plotlines converge, finally moving forward. Halbrand's identity still remains a mystery, but he seems to be growing as a character, finally leaving behind his initial doubts. He was also able to spare Adar's life, even though he apparently has done something terrible to Halbrand in the past. What seems a little off is that it is Galadriel who encourages Halbrand not to kill Adar, since she was the one that was all along the series seeking revenge recklessly, and now, all of a sudden, she feels like teaching patience to others. A bit hypocritical, if you ask me. But I admit, I was gladly surprised by Adar's exchange with Galadriel, because it showed a deeper meaning behind Adar's actions. Let me start by bragging a little, because I had already figured out Adar's identity a couple of episodes before. Feel welcome to watch my review for episode 4, where I correctly guessed that Adar was one of the first elves taken by Morgoth to make his experiments, twisting and torturing them into creating the orc race. I know, it wasn't that hard to guess, but still. What I found pleasing was that they explored deeper into what the creation of the orcs meant for Middle-earth. Tolkien himself said that Morgoth's actions regarding this foul deed was the worst of all of his crimes in the eyes of Ilúvatar, that is, essentially God in Tolkien's works. Nevertheless, none of Morgoth's actions escaped Ilúvatar's plan for the world, and he wasn't able to truly create life only to corrupt it. So, as Adar correctly points out, the Orcs are, ultimately, a creation of the One. Thus, as Tolkien stated in his letter 153, the Orcs can be redeemed, and, in fact, even Gandalf admits at one point that he pities them, for they always lived as slaves to Morgoth or to Sauron. So it makes sense for Adar to care about the Orcs, who suffered the same as him, and can be considered like siblings, although he calls him his children. It is understandable that he tries to create a home for them, even if it is not justifiable that he plans to steal the Southerners' lands. And the fact that they chose to show this on the show is one of its highest points in my opinion. Even if Adar is a character completely made up by the series, it is one of the best additions. What's left to see is what is his relationship with Halbrand, and who this last one really is, but for that, you'll have to join me in my next review of the Rings of Power, so if you liked my content, please leave me a like and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video.